And Britt helps both large corporations and small businesses with insurance, risk management, and employee benefits using the same values they've held true for over 30 years: knowledge, vision, accountability, and service. More information is at bmbinc.com.
Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, there are two events that you can annually count on in June: the legislative session coming to an end and the hurricane season beginning. Both are capable of big wins. We'll look at the latter tonight in terms of what to expect and new technology. We'll also look at the latest on the monuments controversy, who's who in the New Orleans mayor's race, and in this, the week of Memorial Day, the impact of the National World War II Museum. Our Future Watch segment looks at convention center expansion. On the map for us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources; Jeff Adelson, reporter, The New Orleans Advocate; Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter; and Alexandra Cranford, meteorologist, WWL-TV Channel 4. And welcome, Alexandra. This is your first time on Informed Sources.
Thank
Great
you.
to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, the start of June means the start of the hurricane season. Hate to think of it. And we heard just recently a prediction that it's going to be maybe a little bit more active than usual.
That's the latest from NOAA. They came out with their, early season prediction, and it does look like they're going with about 11 to 17 named storms. The average is 12, so it'll possibly be a little bit above that average. They have 5 to 9 hurricanes and 2 to 4 major hurricanes, which is Category 3 or above, of course. So it looks like probably right at, or maybe a little bit more active than normal. That's kind of similar actually to what we saw last year too.
How do they come up, with these predictions to say it maybe is going to be a little bit more active? And by and large, when you take a look at them, they sort of match. They're really kind of good at it.
They do, and we get some of the long-range forecasts from Colorado State University too, and they actually go into percentages. We're better than climatology 80% of the time. So they kind of keep tabs on how well they do. What they're looking at really this year is really just the El Nino phenomenon. So earlier in April and early May, it was looking like there could perhaps be an El Nino developing. That is a big kind of key thing to look at with the hurricane season, because it increases that vertical wind shear, which suppresses hurricane formation. It makes it difficult for hurricanes to form. Now that it's looking like possibly we may not see the El Nino, and if you remember a couple of years ago we had a similar forecast. We were saying El Nino may develop this hurricane season, it may develop, and it never did. So occasionally these things take a really long time to actually come to fruition. But in any case, it looks like probably August and September there's a 50-50 shot of having an El Nino. Of course, that's the peak of the season. So even if it were just getting going, it looks like its effect would probably maybe be too late to really have an effect on bringing the number of storms down. So that's why they're going with kind of average or just above average.
That would be in a situation of pulling for dust storms in the Sahara, okay?
Right.
Yeah, because what they affect the wind shear or something like that. But our area, the Gulf of Mexico area, is most vulnerable later in the season, right? August, September?
It is, yeah. And when you look at the percent of storms that happen typically during the months, actually, we just started with June, but only about 6 to 8% of a season's total storms happen in the month of June and the month of July. So really, we start out slow every year, of course, and then it really cranks up August, and then September 10th is our peak day.
We've also seen in these past years, what was 2012 was the last time that this region was directly impacted, impacted by a storm, and that was Isaac, which was not a huge storm, but it stayed with us forever and really drove up water and just was so windy. But we've seen lately that a lot of them have gone up along the eastern seaboard.
Yes.
Is that a trend that we're sort of in now, or
isn't that interesting?
I mean, we don't want to see these folks hurt, but at the same time, we really don't like to see them in the Gulf.
I know. When I was in my master's program, I was working in New Orleans. One of my fellow meteorologist in the program was working in North Carolina. And so, of course, I was the person that everyone thought of as the tropical person, the person, who would get all these hurricanes. And she has actually ended up getting so many more of these, tropical systems, big threats, the long-term coverage because of those hurricanes. As far as a pattern, last year it was really obvious. There were several storms that went up the East Coast. As far as the long-term pattern, it's still, just a little bit hard to say right now.
And so the names, anything that sort of jumps out at you, there's always a list of names also.
We have the names. Let's see. We've already, by the way, gotten one storm. That was Arlene, kind of an unusual storm that formed in April in the northern Atlantic. So Tropical Storm Arlene is gone. That would be the first one. The next one would be Brett. And if we made it to that 11th name, that would be Katia. If we made it to the 17, which would be kind of on the farther end of the scale, that would be somewhere around Ophelia or Philippe. So that's what we have going on.
We don't want to get too far down the line.
No.
Okay, now in the beginning of June, the next couple of weeks, everything's kind of quiet right now as far as you can see, you the forecaster?
For right now, yeah. This is kind of the time of year where a model may have a run that spins up a low in the Gulf, and people tend to freak out a little bit. So we'll be talking about it as we head into the beginning of June, but typically we don't see a whole lot of activity this time.
Okay, we're going to come back to you in a little while to talk about new technology that can maybe warn us a little bit better. Thanks a lot, Alexandra. Over to Errol right now. And we do have a mayor's race in the city of New Orleans.
You can hardly tell it, though. The people have been surprised how few candidates there are. Now, there's still time for a major campaign to develop. But with each passing day, because once you develop your campaign, you got to start raising money and you got to start getting some key people, some key organizers. The Advocate did a list this past week about who some of the behind-the-scenes people were in some of the three major candidates so far, which would be Michael Bagneris and Desiree Charbonnet and Latoya Cantrell. And you can see the people that are there year after year working behind the scenes are already starting to line up behind those candidates. And so anybody who's waiting or being coy about it, might need to start at least making phone calls right now. None of the three that you run, and any one of them, could prove one day to be like a great mayor, but none of them have really been like what you call major players in urban politics. Desiree Charbonnet, who announced last week, was a municipal court judge, and she at one time was a clerk of a civil court. And Michael Bagneris was
mortgages, right?
Of mortgages. Yeah. Michael Bagneris was a district judge. Latoya Cantrell's been on the city council, and so she's probably had the most city hall experience. But there's not like this person who's been really involved and immersed in politics for a long time. So what that says, I don't know, other than maybe people just don't want the hassle and expense of running for mayor. But it's coming together, and the election will be in September. The kind of issues they're talking about.
Primary is October 14th.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
My throat. Okay. The kind of issues they're talking about is the usual issues you hear every time in the mayor's race. Crime and the environment and safer neighborhoods, all that sort of thing. So.
And budget. And so qualifying ends, I believe, in mid-July. And
right.
So we're in June now. So basically that's about 6 weeks for somebody to jump into the fray, which is not unusual for candidates to jump in at the last minute.
Mitch Landrieu did that. At first he said one time that he wasn't going to run, and then he came back. And to avoid jumping into the fray is a good thing because you become a target once you jump in. And so if you can hold up and be like this last-minute surprise candidate, but if there is somebody thinking about it, they should be thinking hard right now. And of course, the ones who are legislators who might be running right now are very much preoccupied. And so I think they're going to want to do that. And of course, if they do run, then they're going to have somebody to say, well, look at this guy. He was voting taxes all the time. Or if he wasn't voting taxes, he was cutting back on schools or in hospitals. And so being a legislator, you can get a lot of pot shots.
And this legislative session doesn't look like anybody's voting for taxes right now. It doesn't look like it's gone that way.
It's not making any reputations for anybody.
I'm seeing a spot now running, and I can't remember now what it's for, but it features Sidney Torres. He's putting himself out there again. Is that name still bubbling up, do you think?
It's bubbling, but...
we haven't heard anyone one way.
He may be enjoying reality TV more than doing this.
Okay, well, we'll see. Qualifying ends mid-July, so still have some time. All right, something that continues to persist in discussion also, and it's sort of captivated the city over the past almost 2 years, is monuments, monument removal. They have been removed. Where do they now reside, and where will they go?
Well, the city's storing them for now. They've been building a shelter at the storage yard where they were taken after they were removed, and everyone probably remembers the bit of controversy over putting them in that storage yard. So they're building a shelter. The big question now is what replaces them and where they go, as you said. And that we've gotten some indications from the city about. The city has talked about having a public processes for both in slightly different ways. In terms of where they're going to go, the city's going to put out an RFP, and that's going to require any nonprofits or government groups that would like to take the monuments, put in a proposal for what they're going to do with them, where they'd go, what the city would get in return potentially, and other factors like that. There are a few restrictions on that. The city has required that there be some sort of context saying why the statues were put up and why they were taken down. And since the Landrieu administration is going to be evaluating that process or evaluating those responses, it's pretty clear that that's aimed at making sure that the arguments that Landrieu himself has made are reflected in wherever these go. They're also not going to be allowed to be put up in public areas or outdoors in Orleans Parish. Sorry.
Jeff, when you say the city's done this, the city's done that, who is the city? It's the mayor.
Well, it's the mayor, but it's also the city council. I mean, remember
where's the city council? Where's the city council taking a position on that? We haven't heard from them since that 6-1 vote 2 years ago. I mean, have they debated what should happen after?
They haven't, and I think there. You can argue that the lack of the lack of engagement from the council certainly makes this more the mayor's project than theirs. But I think it is important to note that this was something that was initiated by a council vote, and the council certainly has the ability.
It was the council voting for exactly what the mayor wanted.
Well,
which isn't overly uncommon in city politics.
So beyond the removal and the mayor's involvement in it now, is there going to be perhaps what some would consider greater public engagement in determining what's going to replace these monuments? What's going there?
Well, the mayor's staff has said that there will be some sort of a public process. We're still getting the contours of that, but possibly some committees. They've floated ideas for public participation in terms of voting on several options or things like that. And we're sort of looking at now, what that process might entail and what those options are. The mayor himself has sort of put forward the idea that there should be some sort of a fountain at Lee Circle and some sort of monument incorporating an American flag at the site of the Jefferson Davis statue. And initially when that was announced and when shortly before the Lee statue was taken down, it sounded like that was going to be something that was going to be, written in stone. That's where the city was going to go. It sounds more like there's going to be more public engagement now and more involvement from various interested groups. So we'll have to see where that goes.
Have you been by the what now is just the pedestal, the tall pedestal where Robert E. Lee once stood atop? Have you seen it since he's? You were there.
Actually, I was there when it came down, and our office is a block away, so I see it every day on the way into work.
I haven't been around there, but I mean, is it really pretty obvious that something's gone?
It's definitely. You tend to get used to how things look, and so every time I come around that turn, you do sort of notice it's gone. Whether they can, the plan at the moment is still to leave the pedestal there. So whether they can change that a bit so that it's becomes something new that people become accustomed to.
So we're going to be hearing about this over the next week or so of how to have your say about where they should go, and then also what should replace them.
Getting back to the mayor's race, it's going to be interesting to see if this surfaces
Right.
as an issue in the mayor's race, because it may not be as important an issue as crime, but it's something everybody's talking about. And it raises issues of citizen participation in government. And so I think candidates, especially council candidates, should be addressing that.
And we will see if they will. Go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, I was just going to say what's interesting is the three major candidates so far really haven't addressed the monument issue so much, and you know the whole process is likely going to be done by the time they take office, one way or the other.
It'll still make for a fun debate question, for sure.
Well, and there's a dark horse candidate out there, Frank Skurlock, who has made this his primary issue. So I'm sure it'll be coming up in debates.
And I'm sure that we will be continuing to talk about it in weeks to come. But right now we're going to go over to Dawn for Future Watch. And Convention Center expansion is not happening.
It
right
was reported as stalled back in March. This is the project to build upriver, basically from Henderson Street to the power plant or Market Street, that prior to Katrina was going to be an additional 500,000 square feet of convention center space. After Katrina, that plan was scrapped as the Convention Center Authority learned that basically what they need isn't more display space, but an anchor hotel and other services that surround the convention center to be able to really continue to draw in those large conventions. There was work towards a development plan with the Howard Hughes Corporation out of Dallas and local developers Joe Yeager and Daryl Berger. And as of March, it was reported that those talks were stalled. I learned this week that those two sides were never able to come to terms, and the convention center is still putting out a new solicitation for developers for this project. Those same developers might be in play. They're not out altogether, but there is no plan in place as of yet. The person I spoke with said they're really looking for a balance of resources. What can this developer come to the table with? The biggest thing they want done quickly is that anchor hotel, because not necessarily even having a hotel at the convention center, but having more room space for those big conventions to come to town. The 25,000 rooms citywide are proving to be not enough anymore. They need more. You know, for conventions like the medical conventions, the auto dealers, the big bucks ones that we all hear about can't come or can't continue to commit to the city of New Orleans if we don't have more room for them. On the good front, there will be some changes, good in terms of positive. There's progress being made in talks. The Department of Transportation is currently reviewing the plans of the Convention Center to change up Convention Center Boulevard and basically make part of Convention Center Boulevard a linear park and change some of the traffic patterns, create a staging area, what they call a multimodal transportation hub for buses and shuttles that connect people in one cohesive spot to moving sidewalks that would be outside. I asked, will they be covered? Are they designed for our weather? Apparently the plan is all weather friendly, but these moving walkways would be outside. This work would also include improvements and traffic changes along South Peters and Chapatula Street in the Warehouse District to accommodate changes on Convention Center Boulevard. That plan looks like it's moving forward. If the Department of Transportation approves the plans they're reviewing now, work could start as early as this fall and would be completed in 20 months. So that puts it kind of midway through 2018.
And so these moving sidewalks would just run the expanse, the length?
I don't know exactly where they would run. I haven't seen schematics of the plans, but it will really change what it looks like in that part of town. As far as the upriver part, that's a process that it will take a very long time to come to terms and then build. So the timeline for when they pick a developer, when they iron out the plans, when they start building, and when they finish, who knows? The hope, at least the source I spoke with said the hope is that the hotel would be the first portion of that, and that condos and retail and other things that they're talking about for that area would come after.
All right. Well, I mean, certainly that moving sidewalk along the expanse would be really welcome on a hot August day, so you don't have to walk the length of it outside.
Major shows booked through 2030.
Oh,
So,
okay.
you know, when you're
Well, they're keeping busy.
through 2030, you know, that statistic kind of threw me off
That's
when we
good
talked
for
about
the
the year 2030, knowing
Right, for
what
the
might
city's
happen.
economy. And we just hope that over the summer the hurricanes stay away, right, Alexandra? And now with all the new technology now, weather technology, is this going to sort of help you guys in making even earlier determinations of where like a landfall might be?
It could, yeah. There are actually two new models coming out this season from the NOAA, the National Hurricane Center, will be using them to make their forecasts. And so that could be a good thing in terms of, you know, intensity forecasts, which are notoriously not as good as the actual paths. Also this season, there are a couple of new things that people just at home, you know, will be able to look at and kind of see things a little bit differently. The Storm Surge Watch and Warning, they experimented with that last year, and then this year it will be an actual product. So just as if, you know, when they issue a hurricane watch or warning, there will also probably be accompanying that a storm surge watch and warning, which of course is so important for us here. The caveat, of course, to that is that it will not cover areas that are protected by levees, of course. So much of New Orleans, unfortunately, you know, may not find it very useful, but areas along the coast, Mississippi, Alabama, Gulf Coast, they'll all think that, you know, probably that will be a good tool. Also, they have a new, what they're calling an experimental visualization tool, where they're going to kind of map out when, what time, what day the hurricane force winds will reach your area. So just like you have the cone of uncertainty, it'll be kind of like that kind of sort of gradations of where it will show up and be actually strong winds for your area. So that will be good, you know, timing wise, to get a sense of when it's going to affect, you know, me in New Orleans or me in Slidell or Hammond or whatever. And then also they're going to, the National Hurricane Center is going to show where the hurricane force winds are, you know, currently. So if you remember last year, we had Tropical Storm Colin, which the center of the storm actually came close to us. It was just off to the east, and it kind of veered up the east coast from the Gulf of Mexico. But it looked threatening when you looked at where the center was, but the storm was almost completely displaced. The winds were almost all on the east side of the storm. So it was actually, the threat was much farther away from us than it looked when you would look at a, you know, National Hurricane Center cone of uncertainty. So that will be a good thing too, to see kind of the structure of the storm, where the most dangerous part of it is.
Alexandra, when we see those maps, we see those so-called spaghetti maps.
Yeah.
Those little strains, and I think one they always say is the European model. Is there one of those spaghettis that we should rely on more? Is there one that tends to be more accurate?
I did a story on this a couple of years ago because, yeah, we were so focused on the spaghetti models. But, you know, what are they? Each one has a little bit of a different structure and different algorithm. The new ones this year that they're kind of, you know, the National Hurricane Center is kind of touting as, you know, kind of bigger and better upgraded, is one called the HWRF. And so at Channel 4, we put the little marker at the end of the spaghetti model. So if you go on the website, you'll see which one is which. So if you look for HWRF, that will be one of the new ones. And they are actually dropping one, the GFDL, that, you know, is pretty well known and has been used for a while. And there will be what they're calling HMON, which is hurricanes in a multi-scale ocean-coupled non-hydrostatic. So that would be.
So you're thinking that every day, do you?
Right. So if you look for the HMON, of course, the big kind of global spectral models are the GFS and the Euro, and, you know, there are many others that go, you know, in between.
So these are all tools to help you guys with accuracy in predicting where the storm will actually make landfall.
Exactly, yeah.
And this is helping you finding that that's progressing each year, that you're getting a little bit more accurate with it each season?
You know, each season, though, the really the big problem is the intensity forecast. That is always, you know, a big issue. So when we have the cone of uncertainty, often, you know, you'll hear us say, you know, the path probably looking pretty good, pretty accurate. The intensity, though, you know, it could be, this model says a Cat 1 could easily be a Cat 2 or a tropical storm at that point. So that's really the big kind of issue. The path forecast has improved drastically over, you know, the past decade or 2 decades. You know, the intensity forecast hasn't really improved as much.
So hurricanes are still hurricanes. They just have a mind of their own, basically. We all have to be prepared for it. Thanks a lot, Alexandra. This Memorial Day, we also want to remember the impact of the National World War II Museum, which has really been phenomenal.
amazing. It started off as at the D-Day Museum, and it had its impact there. But I think they realized after a while that for it to really grow and to develop a following, they'd have to just expand it to become a World War II museum, which is done it's very effectively. It's been very good at fundraising. It's been very good at putting together quality exhibits. The story is, it goes back to Stephen Ambrose, the history professor at UNO, who proposed the idea and had a collection, had some things to donate. I think donated some money to it also. But his idea was to put it on the lakefront, because that's where the Higgins boats were tested out there. And he was pretty adamant about that. And then as support for the museum grew and they developed a board, the board says, look, we like the museum, but we got to put it downtown. And there was a little bit of resistance, but ultimately Ambrose gave in. And toward the end, he agreed that was the right decision, because what an anchor it's been for that area downtown, so very impressive. They claim, as TripAdvisor ranks the museum as #1 in the nation and number 11 in the world. That's very good. Now, there's a lot of good museums around the world, and when you think of all the Smithsonian museums in Washington alone, I mean, to be in that kind of company, but it's been very effective at doing that. I tell you, I saw the impact. Ambrose wrote that book called Band of Brothers. Mm-hmm. And a couple of years ago, I went over to Normandy, and the name of the tour was called the Band of Brothers Tour. And there was another one called the Beyond the Band of Brothers. And they had they were outright that the tour was based on that book. And you'd go into towns and you'd see these signs describing what happened there, and there were quotes from the book. And so the impact is probably, that book that Ambrose did is probably the greatest impact since The Longest Day, since that movie. And so New Orleans has really had a big impact, not only with the museum, but providing the literature that's really been such an important learning tube.
And the museum continues its education offerings and is going to expand on that. And we've been lucky enough to work with them on a couple of electronic field trips. My colleague Tom Gregory and I have worked with educators there, and they're just absolutely phenomenal. But we've got to say congratulations to Nick Mueller, who partnered with Stephen Ambrose in these early days and grew this amazing facility, not just for us and our community, but for the whole world, and to keep generations of the future informed.
And he's given a lot of credit
about the World War II.
Ambrose is given the credit for having the idea, but Mueller's given the credit for really bringing it to fruition and developing it.
Congrats to Nick, and thank you, and thanks to Beth, his wife, too, for working so hard with him, I'm sure. Okay, time to look ahead. Errol.
Well, the old thing about two things you shouldn't watch being made, sausage and laws. Well, the process of making the laws will end next week, at least at the state level, June 8. This is when they start stuffing everything into the cases. And so this next week is going to be very, very pivotal with the legislature as they finalize these things, heading towards next Thursday's adjournment.
Okay. Jeff.
Errol actually stole mine, but just to take a slightly different angle, there's been lots of things the city's been fighting against in the legislature. It's been successful on most of those so far, so we'll have to see if they can continue to hold back some efforts to overrule some of the things they've been doing.
Okay, thanks. Don?
We'll be keeping our eyes on the Department of Transportation to let you know when Convention Center Boulevard will be another street in our region that's under construction.
Okay, thanks, Dawn.
And if you want more on hurricanes, we have our Eye on Hurricanes special on WWL-TV Channel 4 that airs this Sunday, June 4th at 11 a.m.
Teaches you how to be prepared, which is always good to know. All right, thanks a lot, guys, for being here. Thank you all for joining us. And next week, Informed Sources has a special edition looking at the news media and changes in the news media. So be sure to watch. We'll see you then. Have a good evening.
The firm of Bowen, McLeod & Britt helps both large corporations and small businesses with insurance, risk management, and employee benefits using the same values they've held true for over 30 years: knowledge, vision, accountability, and service. More information is at bmbinc.com.